Welcome, everyone. We're about to dive into a chemical messenger it's basically the body's on switch. It controls just about everything, from your muscles to your memories. And to kick things off, I've got a little riddle for you.
Yeah, I know it sounds like a weird setup for a joke, right? A cosmetic, a weapon of war, and something you buy at the pharmacy before a cruise. What could they possibly have in common? Well, it turns out they all mess with the exact same incredibly powerful system in your body.
The common link? It's all about this one little molecule, acetylcholine. We'll just call it ACH for short. You can think of it as one of the body's most critical mail carriers, a neurotransmitter that delivers urgent messages between your nerves and your cells.
Okay, so if we want to understand how we can hijack this system, for good or for bad, we've got to start with the basics. We need to see how it's supposed to work. And really, it all boils down to the life cycle of just one of these ACH molecules. And it's a super fast life. It all happens in the blink of an eye, really. There are 4 basic steps. First, it's made inside the nerve. Then it's stored up, ready to go, and released when a signal comes in. Third, it zips across a tiny gap and latches onto a receptor to deliver its message. And finally, boom, it's destroyed, instantly. This clears the way for the next message. Talk about efficiency, right? And this diagram really lays it all out for us. You can see the whole journey. Up top, in the nerve ending. That's where ACH is born and packed up. Then it's released into that little space, the synapse, and it connects with the receptors on the other side. But you see that little guy labeled ACHE? That's the real hero of our story today. Think of it as the off switch. It is absolutely critical. Yeah, that off switch, that's an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase. Let's stick with ACHE. It's perfectly positioned right there in the synapse, ready to pounce. The second ACH delivers its message, ACHE swoops in and just obliterates it. Why? Because without it, that signal would just keep firing and firing and firing, and that would be total chaos.
So this leads to a pretty interesting thought, doesn't it? What happens if we start messing with this finely tuned system? What if we could jam that off switch? What if we could stop it from working and just crank the volume on that ACH signal all the way up?
Well, in the world of pharmacology, we basically have 2 main ways to do this. We've got our signal boosters. These are things that either pretend to be ACH or, you guessed it, they block that cleanup crew. And then we have our signal blockers, which just camp out on the receptors so the real ACH can't get through. All right, let's talk about turning the signal up first. We'll look at a group of drugs called anticholinesterases. Now, their job sounds complicated, but it's actually super simple and incredibly powerful. All they do is inhibit or block that ACE enzyme, our off switch. And when you block the off switch, the signal just keeps on going. The ACH hangs around a lot longer, making its effect way, way stronger. And this is where things get really fascinating. Look at how these drugs are classified. On one hand, you've got reversible inhibitors, stuff like neostigmine, which are incredibly useful medicines. They block the enzyme, but only for a little while. But then, on the other hand, you have the irreversible ones. We're talking insecticides and nerve gas like sarin. They do the same thing, they block the enzyme, but they do it permanently. Same mechanism, totally different, and often deadly results. So to really see this signal-boosting idea in the real world, let's take a look at an autoimmune disorder called myasthenia gravis. It is a perfect, and I mean perfect example of why turning up that ACH signal can be literally life-changing. So, with myasthenia gravis, the body's immune system basically gets confused and starts attacking itself. It creates these antibodies that go and destroy the ACH receptors on the muscles. And you can see it right here in the diagram. On the right, there are way fewer places for the ACH to land. That means the signal from the nerve to the muscle gets super, super weak. The result? Really severe muscle weakness and fatigue.
So how in the world do you fix that? Well, this is where those anticholinesterase drugs like neostigmine become heroes. By blocking that cleanup enzyme, they give the little bit of ACH that's released way more time to do its job. It can float around longer, find one of those few remaining receptors, and activate it. It's like turning a faint whisper of a signal into a loud shout that the muscle can actually hear and respond to.
Okay, so that's cranking the volume up. But what about the opposite? What if we need to turn the signal down, or maybe even shut it off completely?
Well, that's where a different class of drugs comes in, the anticholinergics. Now, these guys don't bother with the off switch. Nope. They go straight to the source and just plug up the receptors. They sit there so the real ACH can't bind. The classic example here is atropine,
which, fun fact, originally comes from the deadly nightshade or belladonna plant.
A really cool way to see this in action is to look at what happens to your eyes. Normally, ACH sends a signal to a tiny muscle in your iris, telling it to contract and make your pupil smaller in bright light. But if you introduce an anticholinergic drug, it blocks that signal. The muscle can't contract, so it relaxes, and your pupil gets huge. That's an effect called mydriasis.
And because ACH is used all over the place in your body, blocking it has a ton of effects. It can make your heart race, blur your vision, give you a super dry mouth, and even relax your stomach and bladder. And this huge range of effects is exactly why these drugs are so useful. They're used before surgery to dry up secretions, and they're the key ingredient in those little patches you wear behind your ear for motion sickness.
Now, whenever you have a system that's this important, this widespread, and this powerful, you can bet it's also a prime target. And in this case, it's a target for some of the scariest poisons and toxins out there.
Let's go back to Botox from our question at the beginning. This is how it works its magic. The toxin that Botox is made from, botulinum toxin, it doesn't block the receptor, and it doesn't block the cleanup enzyme. It takes a much more direct approach. It just stops the nerve from releasing ACH at all. Period. No ACH release means no signal, which means no muscle contraction. That's great for smoothing wrinkles, but it's also what makes a case of botulism food poisoning so incredibly dangerous.
And then we have the other extreme, the irreversible anticholinesterases, the stuff we find in nerve gases and some pesticides. Remember how they permanently disable that off switch? Well, the result is a total system meltdown. The ACH system goes into this catastrophic, unstoppable overdrive. The body is just flooded with signals it can't turn off, leading to horrible symptoms like convulsions and ultimately respiratory paralysis and death.
It's terrifying, but thankfully, we have a way to fight back. It's a two-pronged attack. First, doctors give massive doses of atropine. That's our signal blocker, right? It acts like a shield, protecting the body's receptors from that insane flood of ACH. Then, once the patient is stabilized, they use a special drug, an oxime, that does something almost unbelievable. It actually goes in and chemically breaks the poison's bond with the ACHE enzyme, freeing up our off switch to start working again. So, when you take a step back and look at the whole picture, it's pretty clear, right? This one single chemical system has just an immense amount of power over our bodies. And it doesn't matter if we're trying to help it, block it, or hijack it, the consequences are always huge.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. You've got Botox for wrinkles, atropine to save a life, and sarin gas to take one. The difference between a medicine and a poison, sometimes it's just about the dose and how much control you have. It all comes down to manipulating this one tiny, powerful molecular switch.
This whole system is just a stunning example of how powerful targeted medicine can be. You know, for both good and evil. And it leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? As we get better and better, more precise at controlling our own body's chemistry, how are we going to choose to use that power? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.